Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for tuning into Neighborhood News Network. It's a beautiful day where I'm at in Dallas, Texas. It's 70 degrees out and sunny. But George Webb is making a statement today and during his travels. He's saying right now, you better be jumping on the George Webb train because George Webb is currently riding the train while doing a live stream where this is a new thing we're doing, so we're going to see how it goes. But George Webb, how's the George Webb train going over there?
Great, Andy. A lot of the people don't realize they're big fans of mine here yet. They say, "Who are you? And why are you in my way?" I'm trying to order some things here at the club car. So I thought this was just a train full of people who followed us, Andy, but it's not. It's just a whole bunch of different people.
Yeah, so I'm actually. Where are you headed to, George? You're going to break a news story? Anytime I rode the train, it was to Washington D.C. I'm assuming that's maybe where you're headed.
Not quite that far. I think I might stop before I hit the Florida border. But yeah, no. Orlando is kind of like the center point, and then there's opportunities in Tampa, and there's opportunities going the other way for stories. The monkey labs at Orange Park are always fun to go visit. I was, a lot of monkey lab stories lately. There's a big monkey lab in Texas. There's a big monkey lab at the Florida-Georgia border in Bainbridge. So you never know where the monkeys are going to take you.
You were actually, I don't know if it's a monkey lab, but you were actually digging into a bio lab that Governor Greg Abbott was working on over. We got the big border battle going on in Texas right now, and you were posting that he was over in Israel, maybe bringing over a biolab maybe to Texas territory here. Can you get into that a little bit?
Well, it's a 43,000 monkey house near Houston, and I don't know a lot beyond that other than these monkey houses, because they're lab technicians need to work at it, and they need to do gain of function, and they need to aerosolize the monkeys and all these things. They need to be somewhat close to, neighborhoods and neighbors. They're not out in the middle of nowhere. We went to TexMed, kind of out in the middle of nowhere. But this monkey lab is not too far away from residents, and the one in Bainbridge, Georgia, isn't either. And people are looking at these monkey labs sort of like having a nuclear power plant or a nuclear arms depot next to their property. They don't want it because they've seen so many of these hot zone movies where the monkeys escape and everybody dies.
Yep, we have seen a lot of these movies and live exercises happening lately, and yeah, a lot of them birth up right out of a monkey lab, and they like to tell you their plans ahead of time. And we saw in the Bruce Ivans flick, they just leave the Ebola samples just right on the doorstep, just sitting out there overnight. And they walk in the next day and they're like, "There's Ebola sitting out here on the doorstep." So, if anyone's to blame for a breakout, it might be some of these scientists. But I don't know if you saw the news about the Jean Carroll and her lawyer Roberta Kaplan being associated, being actually the judge Lewis Kaplan was her mentor. Did you see that story that came out yesterday after the trial, the conflict of interest?
Yeah, I would take people through this, Andy. It's hard to believe this. This is almost like a father having a son or a daughter as as one of the parties in a lawsuit that they're a judge in.
Yeah, so here's the story. This is a New York Post, actually. Trump lawyers to use conflict of interest between Judge Carroll's attorney in appeal of $83.3 million jury verdict. Excuse me. Trump's lawyers will use an insane and previously unknown conflict of interest between Ejean Carroll's lawyer and the judge presiding over a defamation case against the former president as the basis of the appeal seeking to toss the eye-popping $84 million jury verdict away. Trump lawyer Alina Habba said she was unaware Manhattan federal judge Lewis Kaplan and Carroll's lawyer Roberta Kaplan worked together in the early 1990s at the same powerhouse white shoe law firm until Saturday. When asked about it by Post columnist Charles Gasparino, who was told by a source that the judge was once Roberta Kaplan's mentor. It was never disclosed. It's insane and so incestuous, Habba said, insisting neither the 79-year-old judge nor Roberta Kaplan, 57, who aren't related, disclosed the conflict of interest in a violation of judicial ethics rules. Roberta Kaplan worked at Paul, Weiss Rifkin, Wharton, and Garrison in Midtown from 1992 to 2016 before leaving to become a founding partner of Kaplan, Hecker, and Fink, according to her LinkedIn page. This is news to us, she continued. We are going to include this on our appeal and take appropriate measures. The fact it wasn't disclosed in an ethics violation. During her early years at Paul Weiss, she worked as an associate of the firm at the same time as Judge Kaplan, who was a partner there until 1994 when he was appointed to the federal bench by then President Bill Clinton. Zach Sawyer, a rep for Roberta Kaplan, insisted no conflict exists. They overlapped for less than 2 years in the early 90s at a large law firm when he was a senior partner and she was a junior associate, and she never worked for him, said Sawyer, who declined to provide further comment. But a former Paul Weiss partner who asked not to be named said, like all associates at the firm, Roberta Kaplan did her best to distinguish herself before partners, including Lewis Kaplan. Lou was like her mentor, claimed the former partner. Messages left the Judge Kaplan's chambers and a rep for Paul Weiss were not returned Saturday. So Kaplan was the judge that was overseeing the case, and so dig into how this conflict of interest kind of, if you can, I know you got some choppy reception there, George. How this conflict of interest, we're digging into the Trump derangement syndrome, so this is all kind of leads into that a little bit.
Yeah, every week we see new things that never could possibly ever happen. This is why I say you got to get, if you're going to defend in the insurrection case, that's 10 years minimum, and that's 20 years maximum. So it's better to, because you're not getting a hearing in court, it's better to try the case in the court of public opinion and not wait until the kangaroo court. Sorry, Andy, I think I'm losing you, but I think it's better to get your information out there, get your exculpatory information, get the thing that makes you innocent out there. And Alina Habba just doesn't seem like she's up to it. I don't know what is keeping her busy, but we're going to go ahead and do it. We're going to go ahead and put the exculpatory information out there. I put out a Substack this morning that basically laid it out. The case is very simple. The insurrection case is three gates. There's a one gate, a bicycle gate. There's a second bicycle gate after that gate, and there's a third bicycle gate after that gate. The first bicycle gate is breached at 101. The second one is breached at 102. And then they're stopped at the third gate. Now there's a group of orange hats that disappear at the third gate. But clearly, the president was still speaking until 112, and it was a mile away. It would have taken at least 15 minutes for people to get down there, 12 minutes. So he clearly didn't give the order for the first gate. He didn't give the order for the second gate, and he wasn't even in a position to give an order for the third gate to take the third gate, which means he's innocent, period. So this article here, we're going to do this again in February 24th, live by showing you gate 1, gate 2, and gate 3, but it's like 1, 2, 3 strikes you out at the old ball game, Andy. If you can't prove the first gate, if you can't prove the second gate, you can't prove the third gate, you're out of here. We're throwing this out of court.
And yeah, we see that. We've seen that happen time and time again, pretty much with all of Trump's his impeachment inquiries, everything they've kind of thrown at him doesn't really have the power to stick in the long term. And there's always something like these conflict of interest that come out in the end. I do have a little video before we move on to the Substacks, and George had some summary videos he made for us in the latter half of the show, and because his reception's kind of bad and he's on a train, so we got some summary videos we're going to be playing here in a moment. But continuing on the Trump derangement syndrome path here, we were just talking about the conflict of interest between Roberta Kaplan and Judge Lewis Kaplan, and this was all, everyone kind of knows this, but this was all funded by LinkedIn co-founder Reid Hoffman, and which he definitely was a major funder. There's a group, the American Future Republic, a little nonprofit group that he funded that was using that money to pay the judge and the Kaplans to kind of pursue Trump. But I have this little video of Reid Hoffman from 2016 that I wanted to play for a little bit, and it just shows how much Trump derangement syndrome this one fella has. He's like a one-man fighting machine against Trump at this point. He's made some playing cards, trumped up cards. He's founded nonprofits that are going after Trump. He's funding pretty much every opposite official in the public elections that Trump backs. So here's a little video from PBS on Reid Hoffman showcasing how much he hates Trump.
Presidential campaign from business leaders. Tonight, economics correspondent Paul Salmon talks to LinkedIn co-founder and executive chairman Reid Hoffman. Hoffman is a supporter of and donor to Hillary Clinton, and he is speaking out against Donald Trump. It is part of our weekly series, Making Sense.
In Silicon Valley, Donald Trump is anathema to many high-tech executives. But billionaire Reid Hoffman is a rare one who's defying him publicly. So why aren't there others?
Because I think they're fearful of retaliation. And Trump has shown that he will essentially attack individuals, make Second Amendment jokes, etc. And they're worried that this will be bad for their businesses and bad for them. And
Hoffman, who made his billions founding LinkedIn, running PayPal, and investing early in Facebook and Airbnb, is outspokenly anti-Trump. And he's putting his money where his mouth is. Last month, on the website CrowdPack, he pledged $5 million to veterans charities if Donald Trump would release his tax returns. He's also bankrolled a game, trumped up cards. What's the fastest way to make America great again?
Suing the Constitution.
Suing the Constitution. Reid?
That shaming Miss Universe.
It's the popular parlor game Cards Against Humanity with a snarky Trump twist. While building Trump Tower, 200 undocumented Polish immigrants were paid $5 an hour to destroy what?
Tamper-proof ID cards.
Tamper-proof ID cards.
Make America Great Again sombreros. It's meant to be informative and to enable discourse more than anything else.
But it also mocks Trump mercilessly, prompting this question from Daily Show host Trevor Noah.
Why would you do this?
Well,
because you realize if he becomes president, you're dead.
I just want to point out the point that this man is the one who funded the defamation case for Trump, saying he won it. That Bijan Kerr was pretty much too ugly for him. He made a whole trumped up card set defaming Donald Trump. This is like, you see what's going on here?
It's a little bit actually, inspired by, your show and like.
Don't involve me. No. No.
Hoffman gets why others are Trump mum, and especially why fellow business leaders aren't sharing what they confide to him in private.
people are legitimately worried, almost like a schoolyard bully. If I step up, am I going to be targeted too?
And so what you're doing now is taking on the bully?
Yes, unfortunately. I really wish I didn't have to. I'd wish to be focused on the kind of business stuff I'm doing. How do I contribute to our economic progress? How do I, help create a future for American industry, American middle class, these kinds of things? Those things actually really matter to me. But it's so critical now that I'm taking every available hour and making more hours than I have available in order to get out and speak on this topic.
And you yourself, when you were at boarding school, had encounters with bullies, right?
For the first year, I basically tried to reason with them. I tried to say, look, is this really what you want to be doing? Don't we aspire to be something more? None of that talk worked. And the next year I showed back up and I basically said, okay, here's how it's going to play. Anything you do to me, I'm going to do 2x back to you. You damage things in my room, I'm going to trash your room. You threaten me, I'm going to threaten you. That's the new law of the land. And basically, I was so convincing that nothing happened for the rest of the year. I think boarding schools are like miniature versions of Lord of the Flies.
But don't we all have a savage side? And isn't Silicon Valley a case study in the survival of the fittest?
So what are your thoughts on this Reid Hoffman Trump derangement syndrome? This man seems to be a one-man wrecking crew just funding the anti-Trump movement at this point.
Well, he was one of my best customers in Silicon Valley. And, you got to put up with everything in Silicon Valley. You kind of have to swallow your pride, and because, you're depending on, a lot of other people are depending on you to keep the relationship going. But he really jammed his philosophy down people's throat. I don't think that's appropriate either way, Democrat or Republican. You should just basically do business. It's a business networking company. His business networking should be the same thing. When you put your resume out there, like they said, they didn't ask Joe Kennedy if he was a Catholic or a Jew before he did his last mission where he died. And same thing, when you hire somebody, you shouldn't be asking whether they're a Republican or a Democrat. And this is the number one business network. So, I think he's carrying it too far. I think he also bankrolled Nikki Haley with a lot of dirty tricks in New Hampshire. He's doing the dirty tricks again in South Carolina with the stars and bars. Mm-hmm. He's gone the I'm going to do 10x, to Trump before anything happens to me, and that's kind of like the preemptive attack. It's sort of like Steve Kirsch. He's taken the place of Steve Kirsch. Steve Kirsch used to be the mega donor for the DNC. Now Steve Kirsch is supposedly a hero of the right and the back's injured. So now Reid Hoffman's taking that role. But when you're paying people to cross over from Democrat to Republican so they can vote in the primary, that's just kind of like green mail. That's almost like having a foreign intelligence service try to throw the election, and it's not something that's very becoming of a Silicon Valley. And we also think about Hoffman Roche. Hoffman Roche, the company, again, an Auschwitz company. Hoffman comes up with, I believe, Valium, again, a Auschwitz. It comes from Auschwitz, right? The other thing, Roche taking advantage of all the death camps and so forth. And all of these kids that seem to be in the PayPal mafia, and all these kids that seem to be, especially the PayPal mafia, Peter Omadar, Thiel, Elon Musk, and so forth, they all seem to come from this kind of Q-level clearance bio Manhattan Project. They all kind of come from seems like they inherit their Q-level clearances from the old Manhattan Project, and now they're the bio kids. Right, or they're the high tech kids, and it's kind of sick in a way, because it's like there's no. When did we all vote on the Bio Manhattan Project? I don't think we did. I didn't see Dave's comment there.
He was just making a joke about Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman and the PayPal mafia. Did they share a mattress in the back room?
Well, that's the other thing that Reid Hoffman's very forceful about. He pushes that, the flag on everybody at his company meetings and so forth. And it just gets a little bit old, where you're like, hey, Reed, I'm just trying to do programming here. I'm just trying to make our servers run faster. I'm just trying to make your customer experience quicker and an easier user experience. Why do I have to have an hour to talk about, the pride? So, during my lunch hour, I try to get stuff done here and go back to my job. So he's very much that way in that respect as well.
So moving on to another story, we have Biden pausing funding into the UNWRA, which is after the UNRWA was found that some of the staffers participated in the Hamas attacks, and at the same time, he said they paused funding. In April 2021, Biden was actually paid them $150 million for refugee support and stuff. And we've seen this USAID, this refugee system being used as kind of a covert payment plan for the deep state. I'm wondering if Biden, if there was some staffers in this UNRWA linked to these Biden payments at all. Did Biden pay kind of, I don't know if he paid for it himself, but was this money actually used for the attack itself, unbeknownst to Biden or beknownst to Biden? What are your thoughts, George Webb?
Yeah, well, relief workers always are a useful tool to put people and recruit. So you can recruit, people that are angry or have been attacked with drones or whatever, and then their family has been killed or whatever. And the relief workers are normally the number one use that the CIA uses to create a rebel army. And that's why they drone relief camps. I remember going to Bosnia. Well, I was going to Sarajevo, where the UN was the one responsible for bombing the relief camps in order to get radicalize the kids in the relief camps in order to attack the Serbians. So this is how they do. And it's been, I think, in the relief camps in Israel goes back to 1948, using the relief camps for surveillance. The Nakba, which is the first big migration out of the West Bank, used relief workers, I believe. It's especially Mossad uses relief workers extensively. Médecins Sans Frontières and so forth. So yeah, absolutely. Some
Hunter
of these
Biden
people
was one himself with the UN World Food Program.
Well, the food program is another one where they have vectored things before, and they did remember Food for Oil with Saddam Hussein. A lot of these crazy U.S. State Department, USAID programs where you end up running something that looks humanitarian, but it's a cover for some other thing, like running weapons is the number one thing. Catholic Charities in Africa with Peter Strzok Sr. and Peter Strzok Jr. is another classic example.
Yeah, and there was also little pictures while Hunter was at the World Food Program, like kind of running the operation. ISIS was getting there's pictures of ISIS like handing out food, and it was with the UN World Food Program logo on it. Not digging into that too much, but also yesterday or a couple of days ago, there was no, it was yesterday. 3 U.S. soldiers were injured in Jordan, and over 30 were injured. What are the implications of this, George Webb? I don't know if you're frozen right now.
Yeah, repeat the question. The 3 soldiers were wounded in Jordan.
3 soldiers were killed in Jordan by a drone attack, and more than 30 were injured at a U.S. base. And Biden said we're gonna go get them, or whatever that means. I don't know if it means we're going to war, or we're gonna be funding a different some more wars here in the future. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I noticed how always the drone attacks are along areas where we want to complete pipelines. And the reprisals are always in, in areas, and the areas of occupation are always in pipeline areas. Blackwater will be there, or some other Blackwater kind of contractor will be there. Why is it that all this stuff happens when we have to divert attention from Gaza, right? It's always, now it's Yemen, now it's Syria, now it's all these other, Iran, it's all these other little minor drone attacks. Not that it's minor to kill U.S. servicemen, but it's obviously that we're being poked in the eye, as the American people are being poked in the eye, that we're going to make an emotional response and then sign another big check for another big war. That's what I think is. I mean, I'm guessing Hezbollah with their connections to Syria.
It was an Iran-backed drone. That's why it's kind of
yeah. That's Hezbollah, and we, again, I hate to say we outed that on Capitol Hill in 2017, but we talked about Al-Attar and his connections with Imran Awan and the funding mechanism through the U.S. Congress. And it sounds counterintuitive, but if you fund them a little bit and they do some damages, then we get 100 times more, back for the Israeli lobby, get 100 times more money in terms of defense money. If it's U.S. soldiers dying, it really doesn't affect us that much. Again, this is why you got to go to those dual citizen shadow networks, because they can do operations like this to feather their bed, basically, and they don't care how many U.S. soldiers get killed as long as they get 100 times return. And that's why we out these kind of networks.
All right, George Webb, that is the little news updates I had for everyone. Thank you to the Wi-Fi gods or the internet gods that you could at least have a decent connection while we were doing them. I'm going to get into the little recaps you made this over the weekend. You mentioned the Roach Hoffman heart connection. Do you want to set this video up?
Sure. I think when we look at anything now, let's say we're saying, okay, well, let's talk about the Roche diagnostic dipsticks, if you will, for HIV. Okay, well, first of all, let's remind everybody that in World War II, they did that same sort of testing in the death camps. So again, if someone is willing to do death camps in order to test their dipsticks, would they run a mass formation psychosis? Would they run a live exercise to create their antisense testing equipment, reagents? I don't know. I mean, it's just something, and this is the same thing we have with Hoffman, who has the same kind of background. And when it turns out that there's a direct connection to this McNutt, who's running our National Academy of Sciences, and she's covering up the fact that there are kits out there that are signaling that, hey, this thing's engineered 3 different ways this Sunday. We got HIV in here, we got flu spikes, we got the envelopes of a couple of other things, and then, it's been engineered 6 ways to Sunday. Then you have to start looking at it and saying, why is she covering that up? And again, you can use the dipsticks or the test kits to create any kind of false narrative you want, right? You could say it's flu, you could say it's coronavirus, whatever, depending on what kind of dipsticks that you put out there. So that's why I say there's a lot more to this story that needs to get dug into. And Hoffman Roche, with this heart therapy, again, creates a mass formation psychosis. Donald Rumsfeld again. Donald Rumsfeld, of course, is the one who has the Tamiflu, and he also has a big AIDS drug. He creates or pushes PEPFAR, which is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Research. And what that funded was a huge investment of money. I mean, a massive investment, the largest ever, in Roche Technologies. Roche was able to identify 6 key points along the way in a virus's life cycle, in a retrovirus's life cycle, never before known. If there hadn't been the mass formation psychosis, they wouldn't have gotten that massive, this is the largest ever in history. And Roche was the key beneficiary from the heart therapy. And that turned out to be the only therapy that really works, which is a cocktail type therapy. So yeah, you play this, Andy. I think that's the diagram you're going to see. Is there's 6 different interdiction points all along the life cycle. It's sort of like saying, well, if we don't get him as a garden, we'll get him in junior high school. If we don't get him in junior high, we'll get him at high school, and if we'll get him in college, or we'll get him when he's at his first job. That's the interdiction strategy of HIV, and you'll see the 6 different key points. You and I paid for that because Donald Barr created the HIV, but I'm looking at radioactive material in the people who need to do frequent blood transfusions, like people who have hemophilia, like people who are cancer patients, like people who are transplant patients, like people who are gay at the time, but not as much as you might think. People with leukemia, people with blood-borne radiation, blood type poisoning seem to be, and then they transferred it over. They even named the disease. They didn't name it Roche mass formation psychosis disease. They named it gay man's disease, I believe, when they just to make sure that the press labeled it gay man's disease, when in actual fact it was blood poisoning. It wasn't gay man's disease.
Yeah, and I just have here a little article backing up what George is saying. Gilead efforts to control global market for 2 AIDS drugs. The firm is accused of using patents on a government-funded AIDS drug invented at Emory University to cut off low-cost supplies of ingredients for 2 AIDS drugs. Gilead Sciences, the firm chaired by Donald Rumsfeld before he became head of the Department of Defense, was in the news in 2005 for its patents on Tamiflu, a drug used to treat avian flu. More recently, health groups, including ours, are looking closely at efforts by Gilead to control global markets for active pharmaceutical ingredients, not only for Tamiflu, but also for 2 AIDS drugs, including one invented at Emory University on government grants. These AIDS drugs are expected to be important elements of new second-line treatment for AIDS in developing countries. This is our press release on the complaint filed this week with the Federal Trade Commission. So, yeah, Donald Rumsfeld and Gilead trying to control AIDS patents, and there seemed to be a little kind of the same situation going on when coronavirus was coming out. Which one was controlling the patents? Which one was controlling the vaccines? Which company was making the cash flow? But you want me to play that video, George Webb, or do you got another comment here?
No, I think the video job. It's an hour video condensed into about 8 minutes. So here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Neighborhood News Network. George Webb, Michigan beat everybody.
Hello, everyone. This is George Webb, and this is another one of those great 10-minute recaps. This show that Andy and I did, the last show on Neighborhood News Network, was 2.5 hours long. It was really great, though, because we had a lot of great science. We talked a lot of great subjects, and this show came directly out of a lead given to us by Cynthia McKinney. And this is the McNutt Memo. Most people never heard of the McNutt Memo. The McNutt Memo is the cover-up memo of, hey, how did all these different spikes, these engineered spikes from different viruses get into coronavirus, with this paper from India with these HIV inserts. You may remember Paul Cottrell makes this famous in February of 2020, where he says, hey, this is engineered, this is engineered, and this is engineered. And when you put all 3 of these spikes together, it says engineered. And it led us to an interesting theory, which is the Hoffman-Roche theory of HIV, which is, for those who are not familiar with, both Hoffman and Roche were involved in the death camps. They were involved in experiments to reduce immunity of these prisoners. You may know Hoffman from Valium, but Roche certainly used all this slave labor. And they had secreted a lot of people to Minnesota after the war. And it looks later in 1983, sort of a military operation by Donald Barr to introduce this HIV virus that had been culled from the old Nazi death camps and so forth, to introduce this immunity to create a mass formation psychosis, to create a national emergency. PEPFAR was president's emergency plan for AIDS research, but to initiate a national emergency for a deep dive into the complete workings of the cell. And what you saw before here was a graphic of the 6 different places or the 6 different interdiction points in HIV that you can get involved in with Roche. And it's basically the anatomy of the cell, the anatomy of how a virus infects the cell. And I thought that was very interesting that tied all the way to McNutt, who's now running the National Academy of Sciences. And that person is the person who covers up this HIV presence in coronavirus. Truly an unbelievable historical connection leading right up to maybe the biggest mass formation psychosis of our time. Victim of into just some of the other things we discussed, which was this Insect Allies program that DARPA is running using insects to vector in gene therapy into plants, encouraging farmers to get these infected and doped up insects to put out in their field. This goes back to Bob Malone and the tobacco mosaic virus, the mosaic virus being the easiest one to manipulate, and then carrying that knowledge from the tobacco plant to other plants for corn, or in this example, or what have you, soybeans, whatever your plant is, but literally having this blue beetle or whatever the vector is, putting in the gene therapy, as you can see it turning blue here, and then releasing this in your field. Of course, this comes from bioweaponeering, where you're trying to take out the fields and farms of your enemy. But now we're going to turn it around and we're going to make your fields protected against various insults like insects or other bad weather conditions, etc. And what they recommend here, what DARPA recommends for Insect Allies, is this worldwide system of warehouses where 100,000 gallons of tanks of this blue infective material will be stored all over the world for the good of mankind. Of course, that's also pre-staging something that could be used for something that affects a worldwide pandemic as well. But you see here, in an emergency, you have to pick out the blue bottle, you have to pick out the right infective material in order to dump it into the mosquitoes, get them all juiced up, and then release them out into the field. Sounds like a military operation, sounds like a mass formation psychosis, sounds like a way to subjugate the world population by cutting off their food supply. Also, it can be used for good, as all these things, dual research technologies are. We also covered, interestingly enough, gene therapy for the ear. We talked about gene therapy for the eye earlier in our discussions, and these waving fields of grain reminded us of the actual inner ear and the actual gene therapy for the ear. So it served as a double purpose. We also talked about that in this episode. We also talked about when I went to Washington and there was the mass formation psychosis of all these graves in the field. And I showed how about a third of them said fake news on the actual one. I'm holding that one up here. We also talked, speaking of fake news, we talked about voting machines and how easily they're hacked with a pen. The pen hack heard around the world. We did a whole episode on that. Amber Connor did a great job with Lou Dobbs. And then finally, and again, we covered about 20, 30 different stories in this episode, so I'm just hitting the highlights. But we covered my Substack, where it said, when you come to a fork in the road, take Michigan. And you can see why. Michigan, only 3 days different in terms of the primary. We're going to hold a big event on February 24th in Michigan, in Albion, Michigan. But we want Trump to spend the majority of his time talking about jobs in Michigan, especially in the automotive and then the automotive supply chain in Michigan. So that's why we're having the event on the 24th in Albion at 2:30 to 5:30 at the famous Bohm Theater there. So that people can get there from really all over Michigan within a 2-hour drive to meet veterans, to meet karma docs. So if you want to meet somebody who's doing holistic health, but also as an American frontline doctor or a real frontline doctor, here's your opportunity. But for Trump, it's also an opportunity to meet veterans, to visit a college town in central Michigan, Albion College, to also meet with a lot of the veterans groups and also the student groups and the feeder groups into the college system, into Michigan, versus I think the trap that the DNC is planning for Trump in South Carolina. It's going to be very similar to the Charlottesville trap that they set for Trump, or just set for people who wanted to protest in Charlottesville, where they had all the Stars and Bars flags and they flooded the field with Stars and Bars flag to try to make everybody look like white supremacists. So we'd rather Trump be here in Florida talking about jobs. We'd rather see him on the manufacturing floor. Of course, we're close to the Kalamazoo Pfizer plant there, so we'd like people to come over from the Kalamazoo Pfizer plant where they can tell their stories about working at Pfizer. And we want really Trump to avoid this situation, this scene of Stars and Bars in South Carolina and Nikki Haley. And rather, we would like him to go to the auto plants in South Carolina, like Volvo and BMW, Mercedes. Mercedes is in, I think, Charleston. The other ones are more near Columbia. But avoid this type of crowd scene and go more toward this type of scene where you're actually working with people on the line in either state, but focusing more on jobs, getting away from this electrical vehicle mandate, et cetera, and getting more toward the American worker and away from these political third rails. So that's just a really quick recap of 3 or 4 of the top stories. We cover about 12 in the 2.5 hours. It's really worth your time to watch. But we'll see you all tomorrow on Neighborhood News Network at noon, where we bring it all back again. And we'll even cover some topics like Alina Habba, as Dave is saying here at the end of the show.
And his counter argument, go to South Carolina. Alina Habba looks prettier in a sundress in a snowmobile suit. So he's all right, ladies and gentlemen. I still agree with that statement that Alina Habba does look better in a sundress and a snowmobile suit, written by Dave Underdown. But we got to do what we have to do. We got to be in Michigan at the end of February. We got a little charrette going on there at the Bond Theater. So make sure it's February 24th through February 27th. So make sure you get your plane tickets, you put some air in your tires, you get your oil changes ready, because it's coming up here in a couple weeks. George Webb, that was a great little video you did summarizing our work on the Rauch Hoffman team there, but you made another one on Disease X and how that's like a Clockwork Orange type project that they're working on. Can you set this one up, George?
Sure. It's the same sort of thing where you have Donald Rumsfeld, and he has the power of the press, because that's controlled, and then he has the power of the military, CIA, psychological operations, plus he can bring in foreign operatives. You could create demand for anything. You know, if I made white chocolate-covered crossbows, I might not have a very big market, but if I started poisoning everyone and then saying, there's something in the crossbow that saves you, now all of a sudden I've created a market. This is what he did over and over again. When you attack the dendritic cells, you reduce the eyesight, if you will, of the immune system, which causes these non-specific responses. A lot of inflammation causes you to have this joint pain. You have the various things like Guillain-Barré or chronic fatigue syndrome or Epstein's-Barr, a lot of these unknown, unsolved things, Alzheimer's, things crossing the blood-brain barrier. All these things happen when you poke the eyes out, the eyes and ears, or mainly the eyes out of the immune system, which is the dendritic cell. And Donald Trump, Rumsfeld, continues to do that with superantigens. They're called superantigens. Those are like, punji sticks into the eye of your immune system and they've been in there since 1951. So you can have anything break out as long as you put the super antigen in there. You're going to start creating business for yourself by taking out immune systems, and your Gilead drugs are going to be in a sort of a directed evolution manner are going to be purchased. We know he also did this for remdesivir. So again, you have to put your finger on it. You have to shine a light on the problem before you can solve the problem. It's like a cancer surgeon. Hey, you got cancer. Let's start cutting off limbs. Well, no, wait. Let's do a little imaging first. Let's figure out exactly where the tumor is. Let's get in there with the cryo or get in there with the ablation. Let's not just start cutting limbs off, right? This is the thing. We want to be very specific. We want to say the deep state is the deep state, Hoff and Roche, that are doing these mass formation psychosis to create markets for themselves. I don't know how else to say it.
All right, here we go with the video, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, hello everyone, George Webb. And what I wanted to do is briefly summarize the video I did yesterday with Andy Dabala, and basically just want to review the various sites that we have. They won't be around for very long. This is Neighborhood News Network on Neighborhood News Network on YouTube. We keep getting knocked down, and we don't expect to be there very long. Here is the Patreon site, excuse me, the Neighborhood News site on Rumble. And yesterday, I'll just briefly summarize. We talked about how Cynthia McKinney was getting into looking into 9/11, but not how she's characterized currently as looking into 9/11, but how she's going in for the bioagents. She's going in on Rumsfeld. She's going into Dynport and Dyncore. She's going into the anthrax vaccine that Dynport is making. She's going in at Tamiflu, which is the agent that is the responsible that you take if you get a weaponized flu. And she's looking at Gilead with Rumsfeld and Tamiflu. She's looking at HIV in Africa, an outbreak in Africa around, diamond mines in Sierra Leone and uranium mines in Congo. This Kagame she's looking at. So this is why I used Cynthia McKinney a lot in 2016, because she was in all the places I was. And she was looking into all the force multipliers that Dyncore was providing for people like Paul Kagame, who were these warlords in Rwanda that were going into Congo and trying. I think Congo is like 5 times the size of Texas, maybe 10 times the size of Texas. It's big, right? And all the resources of Congo, and then Haiti. She was looking at Haiti. We got the tail numbers with Jeff Epstein going back and forth to Haiti, and U.S. Virgin Islands so close to Haiti, and they could do all these campaigns without having U.S. laws in Haiti testing this virus vaccine game. She also dealt with Bill Swing, who was doing these bioagent testings. She was on the House International Relations Committee, the HIRC. She was on the House Armed Services Committee, HASC. So she was a power player going right in, and that's why I focused on her, and that's why we brought her into this series. And I hope to talk to her very soon to bring you more. She wrote a book called "Ain't Nothing Like Freedom," and I read the book, and it's more about "Ain't Nothing Like the Constitution." These attacks, these disease X type attacks, which were worked out in Haiti and worked out in Africa and then worked out in Arab Spring and then worked out in Iraq and worked out in Afghanistan. The idea is they're coming to the United States. This clock, this disease X clock, disease X clock is ticking. And the key question Andy and I asked in the show was anthrax X the first, is the X on the end of all these things? Are they all variants of some kind of anthrax where they just put different viruses into anthrax? But was anthrax the first place where they said, no more kinetic warfare? We have to take over a civilian agency like WHO, and we have to make it look like it's for the good of everyone, right? And we have to do this with bioagents. We can't do this with force anymore. It has to be surreptitious.
We have to have sort of these breakouts of things. And then we have to be brought in as the smarties that are the saviors, right? So it's a low intensity warfare. This is what World War DARPA was about, rather than this high intensity warfare, right? And then we're going to be brought in. We have to get rid of WHO as it exists. It's this collegial group of people helping each other, this Médecins Sans Frontières, these Doctors Without Borders. We got to make it into a military organization. I got it. We'll provide the test kits only to our military people that we're trying to infiltrate. We'll make all the people from the old school and the collaborative school look like dummies. We'll take out this Urbani from Médecins Sans Frontières, who got the Nobel Prize in '99. We'll take him out. We'll put this guy named Stohr in there, who is H5N1 guy. We'll have this H5N1 in the Straits of Malacca for the Dutch. We'll have the H5N1 in Hong Kong for the British. And then we'll be able to introduce these people into the WHO from the Wellcome Trust and from places like the Erasmus Lab. And we'll basically take it over, a military clockwork type operation, sort of a DAA type operation to take over the WHO, right? So that's why we went to the Cynthia McKinney thing. And in the show, we go to my, in the show, you'll see, and we're creating the record here just in case it gets whacked, which it will very soon. We go to my Substack, georgewebb.substack.com. We see all this is happening now right in front of our eyes. We're seeing the ticking of the clock. It's almost like Scott Pelley is doing the race call. Here comes disease X on the outside line. You know, we had FX, and now we have coronavirus. And now here comes H5N1 on the outside. Yeah. So it's not something we haven't called out. We've called it out since March 2020. Right. But here we said it was at that time, the enforcement arm was Armed Diplomatic Security Services, U.S. State Department, which is sort of a CIA shadow military, reporting to the highest levels of NATO. Right. But now we need to shift that over inside of WHO. And now here we have WHO rolling out a global police force. So we have the abdication of sovereignty with the current IARC, IHR provisions. Right, that coming up to the March meeting, and now we have the global police force to enforce it. We're moving the Armed Diplomatic Security Services out of our State Department from NATO, and we're moving it into WHO. Then we have here, everyone agrees, all the people from IG Farm and subsidiaries that got absorbed into drug companies in Switzerland or got absorbed into the Dutch pharmaceutical companies, they all agree this disease X clockwork is going to happen. They all agree that this is about ready to happen at the WEF. So they're in complete agreement. And the conspirators, when the witches that are brewing the next bioagent, the next disease X, you know, double, toil and trouble, when they all agree that something wicked this way comes by the pricking of my thumbs, right? It's going to happen. Not that I want it to happen. I'm just saying when the witches are brewing, something wicked this way comes. So, and in this case, they say it's going to be 20 of the guys like Stohr, Klaus Stohr, who put in the pandemic surveillance and was able to catch SARS. You notice how they always have a mass formation psychosis that makes them look good, right? And also the same thing he catches with SARS also kills their body in the same felt swoop, right? And then he also puts in the rapid deployment force with SARS and Matt Pottinger in 2003. Isn't it interesting? Now it's being formalized with planes, rapid deployment force, weapons, carbines, etc. 20 times worse than COVID. So not the live exercise anymore, the green, what they call the green light, the real op, right? Here we are, make no secrets here. We go to the bioweapon factories, we go to the bioagent factories. There we are in Rotterdam at the Erasmus Lab. We talk about the people who actually are the critical individuals and the critical secretariats that are created by NATO to be injected into the WHO to take over. It was called the Secretariat. Sounded too much like, you know, the secretary will disavow any knowledge of this operation, you know, for Mission Impossible. It sounded too intelligence agency. So they changed it to the SAGE group. These are the wise men, S-A-G-E. They're the ones that we make the test kits for. Urbani's, they're the dummies. They're the ones that are dead, right? Even though they got their Nobel Prize. They're collecting the Nobel Prize in death. From what? SARS, right? We're the ones who put in the surveillance system now. We're the ones who put in the rapid deployment force. We're the ones who put in the police force. It follows the Hitler model. You bring in the Abwehr, you bring in the intelligence officers, the political officers, and then you have to have the stormtroopers. You have to have the SS. What good is your Gestapo without an SS, without stormtroopers, right? So that's the next level. Here you see me saying, it goes all the way back to Virginia Benassi, 2009, with a mosquito-borne illness for thrombocytopenia, lack of white blood cells in your veins, and thrombosis, which is clotting. And here's all the mosquitoes biting her face, right, with all the different disease X's we wrote about 2 years ago. It's amazing how these breakouts always happen in key strategic straits of the old Dutch or British Empire. One's the Strait of Malacca next to Singapore. One's a Dutch possession going all the way back to the oil riches of Indonesia. And the other one is a trading port for Malacca for the British Empire. And around the corner, of course, what do you have? Hong Kong. Lord Pottinger, the first lord of the opium trade, right? And here's Matt Pottinger making sure that H5N1 breaks out there in 1979. Again, who's the hero there? This guy named Storr, right? Again and again and again, it's always the British protectorates that seem to have these breakouts. Asian flew 57, Hong Kong flew 68, 97 with H5N1. It's always, always, always British protectorates or Dutch protectorates that always seem to have this trouble with new novel viruses. Here's all the receipts. I would, if for those who just want to see that, is this a recapitulation of the old British trade routes? Are they trying to give the Pottingers back their trade concession in Wuhan, their trade concession in Singapore, their trade concession in Hong Kong? You be the judge, but it seems Kissinger's close connection to Stan Pottinger and the Final Solution virus, it seems like an effectuation of that strategy. You give us something, you give us a little bit of something, and we'll give you a whole lot of something. We'll make you our trade partner for bioagents. We'll call it USAID Predict. We'll create bioagents together. It'll be a great partnership. So again, there's a pandemic treaty here, and if you don't sign it, X marks the spot. Disease X marks the spot. You will be targeted. Right? Nothing new. We've used bird flu. The last one, Ron Klain, member with the last bird flu with Joe Biden. Guess who's running the show now? Ron Klain, same guy. Right? So again, not speculation. International condemnation of this gain of function work. Erasmus Lab and Kawa OKA here in the United States. Kawa OKA does 7 genes. Ron Faucier does 5 genes. But make no mistake about it, it's to make it more pathogenic or more transmissive. Rixey confirmed that. Here's Paul Cottrell confirming it's the PR8 gene. They actually took it from the old H1N1, which killed 30 million people. Some people say 100 million. But when you're actually taking things that from things that make things transmissive or pathogenic from H1N1, and you're putting in an H5N1, that's the witches brewing. That's double toil and trouble. They're not going to all that double toil and trouble for nothing, right? So you hear that Scott Pelley clock, the disease X clockwork, okay? We outlined it, again, March 2020. Well, how? Are we all, Kreskin, amazing Nostradamus people? No, we read the predictive document, the R&D blueprint from the WHO created by NATO, created by the Secretariat. Later it's changed to the SAGE. Jeremy Farrar. Now everybody's saying Jeremy Farrar, right? Everybody's.
I believe
Another summer a little bit later. Known as
forgot about that part of the video. But George Webb does a great breakdown of Disease X and Clockwork Orange and some of the connections that were happening. I'm just going to throw some on the screen here. You were mentioning Gilead Sciences and some of the research they were doing. I just want to remind everyone that they funded Veklury, aka Remdesivir, aka GS5734. They actually were paying Ralph Barrick and Timothy Sheehan to develop it in their North Carolina lab. At the same time that these scientists are trying to make the SARS virus more virulent, more pathogenic, and they were cooperating with the Wuhan lab. So it's just more of these connections that were going on. I'm throwing up some Sina Bavari. He was cooperating with Gilead Sciences as well, working on GS 5734 with the Ebola virus and the rhesus monkeys. He was actually synthesizing the drug himself. And in the end, I do want to say Sina Bavari was one of the gentlemen that got paid. Gilead hands shareholders over $2 billion while shamelessly profiteering from taxpayer-funded COVID-19. And if you go down in this article, Bavaria is one of the scientists mentioned is having some conflict of interest with Gilead Sciences. So just more a little proof of what you were digging into there, George Webb. So we're trying to figure out what's the next disease X, what's Gilead working on, what are these Bavari and Barrick, what are these scientists working on? Because that's going to tell us the next disease X that's going to be coming out.
Yeah, and I'll just wrap up by saying that I think it's going to be H5N1, and I do think it's going to be Tim Alefantis, as my old partner and my deceased partner said in 2017. And she felt very much that a virus vaccine game is going to be played with the universal vaccine at Sanofi Aventis. So we'll see. It also uses RDRP, which is the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, which also feathers the bed of Gilead and remdesivir. It also uses remdesivir. So bring back all of the vents, bring back all of the oxygen tents for another round. So this is what I'm kind of saying is they could test out the new vaccine. The new vaccine sometimes causes the side effects that you need the therapeutic for. And so it's a virus vaccine game all in one. So I think it's going to be, for all those reasons, I think it's going to be for Sanofi again, which is Tim Alefantis. And I do believe the task force is going to be right on that. She just basically, and it is going to be 20 times worse than coronavirus because they said so. And then I do think it's going to be remdesivir, RDRP. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Hamish is asking, when did bird flu kill a minimum of 30 million people? That was in 1918. Correct.
Well, bird flu normally doesn't kill like that. It kills people that are chicken workers, but it doesn't kill many humans. It kills lots of chickens. H7N9 does too. But when you add H1N1 and you put that into, like Paul Cottrell was saying here with the PR8 gene that made it so pathogenic, then it does kill. And it doesn't only kill in a U-shaped curve with young children and old men or older people. It also kills in a W curve, which also attacks military age men. So that's why we saw it 100 years ago, and that's why I think we're going to see it again. So, and that's a pretty full slate, Andy, for one day, don't you think? I mean, that's a lot of news in 1 hour.
That is a lot of news in 1 hour. Thank you for actually still doing the show while you're making your travels there, George Webb. It's actually a little fun watching you do give us a little view of where you're at right now, if you can. Just outside of dirty old train yard.
Yeah. Sebring, Florida. Sebring, Florida is about as industrial and agricultural as you want to get. Now, that's where our food comes from. So, I mean, I love our farmers, so there they are. But
not as pretty as the Greyhound from Toledo to Washington, D.C. I'll say that, going through the Appalachian Mountains there. But
we get to live such a colorful life, don't we? We get to look at grain elevators, and But anyway, I love it. It's America.
Yeah, there's no better way to see America than on a train. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you can follow George Webb for more real news updates at George Webb's Twitter, at Real George Webb 1. Also, make sure you go to his actual page, hit that Buy Me a Coffee link, hit that PayPal link, paypal.me/George Swaggart, or you can donate via Venmo as well. I believe it's Webb on Venmo. Or you can go to his Substack. You can always subscribe to George's Substack. He's up at 2 in the morning writing news Substacks for you, trying to get the news out there before everyone else wakes up. So when you watch the regular mainstream news at 7 p.m. or 7 a.m., they're actually going to George Webb's Substack and reporting what he's reporting on. That's how it works, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you're the first one catching up on the news. All right, George Webb, enjoy your travels. Have a safe trip, and enjoy that, and enjoy the beautiful country of ours.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you for all your hard work. See you Wednesday at noon. Yeah.
See you
and
Wednesday.
Tomorrow.
Go ahead.
Tomorrow with Peter Duke at 5. Yeah.
Peter Duke at 5 p.m. tomorrow. And ladies and gentlemen, always remember, blackberries matter.
Started seeing like blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries, government issued blackberries. They were blackberries. They were blackberries. They were blackberries. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment. Man, this looks like government issued equipment.